What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday. Today we're going to obviously do the verses of the two Minosaurs. Many people wanted to see it, myself included, so we're going to go ahead and get to it. We got a little bit of house cleaning to do, and then we can get right to it. Last week, the Unicron Coneheads Super 7 stuff. Had a lot of people that took that personal. And I'm not talking down on those folks now. I was contacted by a number of people. Look, there's a difference in seeing something that you don't like and criticizing that thing. But that's not the same thing as secretly wanting it, not getting it, and then saying it's terrible, and then finding one piece of plastic that's not colored the way that you thought it was colored, that you weren't gonna buy it anyway, and then trashing it. They're two different things. One is a criticism, one is hating. One is a matter of opinion, one is a matter of jealousy. And they're two different things. I think most people got what I was trying to say, and once again, not speaking about anyone personally, but just from the amount of inbox stuff that I got, I would imagine that that shoe felt pretty comfortable on some of your feet. And if that's the case, then that's something you need to examine. I can't help you with that. I'm in for it. If it comes in and it's garbage, I'm gonna say it's garbage. But one piece of plastic that's colored differently does not inherently make something garbage to me, whether I'm gonna buy it or not. If you're like, look, I think it's garbage because of all of these things, well, that's cool. I get that too. But to say like, I knew it wasn't gonna be any good, that's why I didn't get it. No, that's not why you didn't get it. You and I both know why you didn't get it. This might make you feel better about it, and that's cool. But let's just all be honest with ourselves. And like I said, this is a Hasbro product, a Hasbro Transformer at that. I am 100% prepared to murder this thing. But I gotta give it the benefit of the doubt until I have it in hand and mess with it, and then I can have an opinion about it. A valid one. Moving on to the Minosaur one, oddly enough, I think most people got where I was coming from. It's beautiful, it's a mess, it's a beautiful mess. It's not unlike most X-Transbots products where it's just extrapolated to the 5th degree. Looks great, poorly made. Poorly built, over-designed, not terrible, and can serve a very specific purpose because it looks pretty. But it's a mess. And then I don't know what else I was able to get up this week. I had a lot of stuff I wanted to, but I'm recording this Monday. I started this video at 7:40 a.m. It is now 2:40 p.m. and I'm just getting started with the intro to it. That being said, we are going to compare them once again. I try to remain as objective as possible. Of course, sometimes I have to enter my subjectivity when stuff is a matter of what is sculpted better or something. I have to give my opinion on it, but I try to stay as fair as possible. This one has a lot of like nuances to it where it's like, well, this kind of this, and maybe I'll give a point here and take a point away there in order to kind of make it balanced because of the dynamics that the trailer was sold separately with X-Transbots. It was included with DX9s. That, you know, there's a lot of interesting variations. That the X-Transbots has the base mode. That, you know what I mean. There's just, while they are comparable, there are some things about them that does complicate comparing them. But I think we can go ahead and get started. But in order to get started, we have to start with accessories.
Accessory-wise, they both come with the huge sword. The DX9 one is painted. The X-Transbots one is like kind of speckled. They both come with guns. However, the X-Transbots one is far more cartoon accurate. The DX9 one is linked to that insect thing and doesn't really work, you know, the way you'd like it to. So that's kind of weird. And then X-Transbots has the extra face. So I don't know. It's really close. It's pretty much a tie. Both come with the sword, both come with a gun. The DX9 gun does transform into another thing, so there's something cool about that, but it's not what most people want, so I'll probably just tie them out. Gimmicks-wise, they both have the light up feature.
Alrighty, so build and materials. And it's complicated. It's complicated because the materials are good on both. Hardware-wise, they're about evenly matched. There's some ratchets here, there's some tension there, etc., etc. There's some places on the X-Transbots where I wish more stability was there, but I think once again, if I'm going to edge them out for build, then I can't hold that against them for hardware, so I'm going to tie them out for that as well. So I'm going to tie them for materials, but build gets far more complicated. So everything about the DX9 one works perfectly, with the exception of the rear mounted vehicle staying stuck on. Now, once you have the adapter in for breakdown, he does work much better, but I'll be honest with you, when I got that installed, now my Wild Rider wants to act up. But for the most part, it's working much better. But it's not 100%, is it? Now, for the X-Transbots, the arms work perfectly, the legs work better than the DX9, but they're not perfect either. But all of the panels tend to fail on you as you're manipulating it. Plus, the balance issue has to come down to build. So I'm gonna give it to DX9 just because of the finickiness of the X-Transbots. Moving on to sculpt, we will start with the kind of full frontal, so to speak, and once again, kind of a mixed bag. So I love the X-Transbots sculpted detail. I prefer all of their sculpted detail in the body and legs over that of the DX9. However, I prefer the sculpted detail that kind of pops with the silver accents on the arms over the X-Transbots. I also like the sculpted detail in the purple on the chest and pelvis on the DX9 over that of the X-Transbots. Proportionately, I like how the bulk of the DX9 in the upper body matches that of the lower body, whereas on the X-Transbots, the bulk of the upper body is significantly larger than that of the lower body. However, let me just reiterate how much I love the sculpted detail in the body and legs of the X-Transbots. Line work after line work in the thighs, the calves, or the shins, I guess rather, the chest, even the shoulder pauldrons, along with the inside of the arms, specifically the forearms. So the presentation of it all, I think, goes to DX9, but the sculpt specifically goes to X-Transbots here. But the proportions go to DX9, so I gotta tie them out. Moving on to the head. As far as the DX9 goes, I like the expression. I also personally like the silver paint, but I know that I'm not necessarily in the majority there. However, for the X-Transbots, I love that they have the light up eyes, plus they have paint on the eyes, and I much prefer the horns of the X-Transbots, which are much more devilish, much more intimidating. And ironically, the sculpt work of the cheeks and chin seems to be more clearly defined in the X-Transbots. From the side, honestly, I think X-Transbots takes it. I think it has a better head sculpt from the profile. Once again, the horns work better. I like the little sculpted details in the ears, for lack of a better term. I think the face looks a bit more pronounced on it. I just think it looks better. Moving on to the chest, let's talk about the paint. So, the X-Transbots is fully painted on the chest. The DX9 uses accents. It appears anyway. At the very least, the X-Transbots is using a metallic paint that pops a bit more. I like the sculpt work better on the X-Transbots, but I like how less panely the DX9 looks. The DX9 actually looks like a purposeful thing to me, whereas the X-Transbots looks like a collaboration of parts. Looking at them from the side, I think the DX9 just takes it. I like the gray with the purple accent. It helps break up the color palette a bit. I also like, I'm not sure if you can see it, but right behind Dead End, there's a silver accent. Doesn't need to be there, just is there. Plus, it's super clean. We also have an accent at the front. It's a little gray accent. Not sure if you can see that either, but just it all works together and kind of creates something very solid. Now, the back of the X-Transbots with the vehicle, look, this thing falls over all over the place, and Motor Master's getting shook around, so that may not be 100% tight, so I'm not even going to judge that. But just overall, the presentation just looks a lot better, both sculpt and paint on the DX9 here. As far as the arms, let me tell you what I like about the X-Transbots. I like that it has the red and yellow accents on the arm itself, where it's not just the cars on top of the gray. If you would have asked me if I would have liked that better, I would have told you no, but seeing it in person, I do. I like how full the back of Dead End looks on X-Transbots as well. However, on the DX9, I like the silver sculpt work and accents, the silver accents on the arm better. I also like how drag strip is cleaner, and I like how Dead End sits up a little higher, which makes Menasor look a bit more symmetrical to me, and I prefer that. As far as from the side, if we look at Dead End, while the all red elbows are more accurate, I do like the color breakup of gray on the DX9. I also like the sculpted detail in the elbow better on the DX9. But for the X-Transbots, I like the Porsche symbol, the gold paint. I like the full Dead End once again on the arm. So this is really a toss-up to me. I think the differences here are pretty much negligible and entirely subjective. As far as drag strip, to me, this is a cut and dry case of the DX9 being superior. The engine block being cleaner, the fuller looking arm of the transformation of drag strip, along with the kind of tie that they do everywhere else regarding the paint, it just allows DX9 to take a clear-cut advantage here, in my opinion. As far as the pelvis, I like the general shape of the X-Transbots more, sculpt-wise, and it is fully painted. However, the purple pops more on the DX9, ironically. So this is kind of a wash to me. It's nothing really significant about either. For me, the side of the hips is very similar to the side of the chest, where it's just cleaner, it's more purposeful. I like the color breakup. It doesn't look like a whole bunch of parts. However, I do like the solid black look of the X-Transbots, but because of just how panely it is, it's just not enough enough to take the cake here from the side. As for the thighs, I think that DX9 takes an L here. I think that X-Transbots beats them not only for the paint from the front, but also the sculpted detail, as well as not having that kind of gap between the top of the thigh and the hips. So some credit has to be given there. As for the side of the thigh, I gotta give it to DX9, namely for those extra details that are in there. Like it just brings it a bit to life in a more significant way. Front of the legs, the sculpt work on the DX9 is more cartoon accurate, but we have a place for cartoon accuracy. So we're not gonna give them a point there. I also like the proportions better, but we've already given them a point there at the opening part of this, so I'm not gonna give them a point there, which is pretty much just left to things undiscussed, which is the amount of sculpted detail on the X-Transbots, and that's where I'm gonna give the point. Looking at them from the breakdown side, I think they both do things well. As you can see, I don't have the tires quite lined up with the X-Transbots because it keeps falling apart on me while I'm doing this review. But to be fair, the DX9 breakdown isn't quite sitting properly either. So I like the sculpted ridges on the X-Transbots. However, I like the bulk of the DX9. I like the bulk of the feet of the DX9, but I like the paint on the X-Transbot. And that kind of goes for the frontal view also, which I didn't really mention. And as for the Wild Rider leg, it's pretty much the same bag. They're both pretty clean from the back. However, I do like that the foot on the back of the DX9, for one, keeps it balanced, and for two, is there. Whereas with the X-Transbots, it kind of is just a heel in the front of the foot. It has huge balance issues. As you can see, I had to have his arms forward just to have him hold this position. It's not great. So that's kind of my issue there. But aesthetically, sculpt-wise, I got to give it to DX9. Paint-wise, I probably got to give it to X-Transbots. Now, before you start getting too razzled, these points here are mainly for sculpt. X-Transbots takes it mostly in paint, so they'll win the paint category. But DX9 is going to take the sculpt category because they edge them out in the torso, arms, and hips, as well as the back. And X-Transbots takes the head and lower legs. And they tie from the front view the detail in the X-Transbots versus the proportions of the DX9. And they tie in the thighs because X-Transbots kind of gets the front and DX9 kind of gets the side. Moving into articulation, we'll start with the head. The X-Transbots has the swivel. It has, it comes apart, but it has a little bit up and a little bit down. The DX9 has the swivel. It has a little bit up, probably on par with the X-Transbots, but it has more down. And apparently it wants to come apart also. Waist swivel, an ab crunch, ratcheted waist swivel, ab crunch. We're just gonna do the dead end arm. Universal, ratcheted, gets you up to 90 degrees, and it's tensioned well. You get a ratcheted swivel around, you get a butterfly joint, you get a bicep swivel, you get a double jointed elbow for the full run, wrist swivel. Fingers are articulated on a base pin knuckle, secondary and tertiary knuckles, and a hinge at the base knuckle. The thumb is on a hinge at the primary knuckle, a double hinge, and then a secondary knuckle as well. The DX9 has a hinge at the base of the shoulder, an additional ratcheted hinge at the shoulder, but a limited range overall because the tension doesn't work as well. It also has a ratcheted hinge around, so no issue there. Ratcheted bicep swivel, that's superior and does matter with bigger bots. We have a double jointed elbow for the full range. Wrists are on a swivel. Fingers are on a ball peg at the base, which does allow for the spreading, as well as a secondary and tertiary hinge, or I guess primary and secondary hinge rather, at the knuckles. And then the thumb is on a ball peg that comes out to a primary and secondary hinge on the thumb. Ratcheted out to the side, holds it pretty well, goes for the full Van Damme. Tension to the front, goes to about there, holds it pretty well as well. Ratcheted out to the side. It's funny, ever since I got Breakdown to work, now Wild Rider doesn't work. I didn't have any problem with him at all, now I do. For the full Van Damme, forward to about the same range, it's also ratcheted. Thigh swivel, ratcheted thigh swivel. Single hinge knee, holds it perfectly well with tension. Ratcheted knee for 90 degrees. A little ankle tilt down, a little ankle tilt up, and a rocker. No ankle tilt down, no ankle tilt up with a ratcheted rocker.
And then the final move here is X-Transbots takes the lead by 1 point because they have a butterfly joint for the shoulders, but DX9 has the wider head range. X-Transbots has ankle tilt and rockers, whereas DX9 just has the rocker, but DX9 is stable, but we're not talking about that now. But going through it, we do realize that DX9 uses more hardware, so we have to give the hardware point to DX9, but overall articulation, X-Transbots takes it by a pinky finger. In terms of scale, I think it's pretty negligible. However, if I had to give the point, I would give it to DX9 because they matched the scale of the current combiners perfectly. They're not close, they're not in the ballpark, they matched it perfectly. Whereas XTB falls short and then their bots fall short as well, so it just ends up being kind of inaccurate. So overall, I think scale has to go to DX9, but if you're speaking specifically about Menasor, I think it's negligible. Moving on to the transformation. So this is pretty straightforward, right? One is relatively fun, enjoyable, interesting, and rewarding, and with the exception of a few parts that don't lock in 100%, namely Menasor's left shoulder, works pretty much fantastically. The other one is a complete nightmare, a disaster, a reason to call out sick from work, a reason to skip school, a reason to move out of the state, flee the country, get on a space shuttle, and try to live on another planet just to avoid the potential possibility that you would have to one day do it again. So I think it's pretty obvious that the DX9 takes the cake here. As far as the alt modes, we'll just go ahead and compare all of it. I think the clear winner in trailer modes specifically is X-Transbots because it's probably the best trailer we've seen so far, and because the DX9 one is huge. But on top of that, I do think the scaling works best for DX9 with the bots. However, the X-Transbots don't look terrible. It just Motormaster looks way too big, or arguably the Stunticons look way too small. But the vehicles all work. But there's just enough good because the X-Transbots bots look better generally. There's just enough good on the X-Transbot side of things to just give them the win for the modes across the board, honestly.
All right, so we're not going to pick any of these up today because it's going to be too much and the kids definitely can't handle it anyway. So we're just going to say which one looks better.
That one.
Fair enough. Okay, which one looks better to you?
This one.
That one. Okay, thank you. All right, Selena, which one looks better to you?
I like this one.
Okay. Which one of these looks better?
That one.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which brings us to the end. So they tie in accessories somewhat reluctantly. I can see how one might argue that either way. To be honest, to me, it's not a big enough difference to sort of moan and groan about, so I gave them the tie. Gimmicks is both the tie as well. Once again, there's wiggle room there because you could argue that the gimmick to DX9's Motormaster is that it has the skeleton already. Too many nuances there. I just had to play it the way my heart dictated. The build easily goes to DX9. The hardware goes to DX9 after we looked at the articulation more thoroughly. The articulation goes to XTB by a margin. The sculpt goes to DX9. Once again, that's arguable. But the paint goes to X-Transbots. The scale goes to DX9, both because they nail the robot scale and the combined scale, whereas the X-Transbots doesn't really do either. Transformation goes to DX9 because the X-Transbots is a complete nightmare. The alt modes go to X-Transbots. They nail the car modes, and the bots individually look better than the DX9 bots, in my opinion. The presence is a tie because it was split 2 and 2 in my house. The price goes to DX9, and accuracy is a tie because they're both accurate in very different ways. The sculpt work on the DX9 is more accurate. The kind of overall color palette on the X-Transbots is more accurate. It's just, once again, a matter of nuance and minor gripes. Which brings us to a final score of 6-3 DX9. Not as close as I would have predicted, in all honesty.
And I gotta be honest with you, I thought it was gonna be a lot closer. My personal opinion, just like if somebody was like, which one should I get? The X-Transbots is better looking. The DX9 is built infinitely better. Infinitely better. Just in having to deal with this X-Transbots again today, I'm already irritated. Because of just how much it flops around and stuff comes untabbed and it becomes a mess and you have to fix it and fix that, and it's aggravating. It's an aggravating piece. But once you got it where you want it, it's gonna look pretty. The DX9 looks clean. Much cleaner. Doesn't look as pretty, but it's super functional. Comes down to what you want, and there's no wrong answer there. That's a matter of preference. The good news is we'll compare the DX9 with the fans' toys when that day comes, and we'll see who's the ultimate champion, but more on that later. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.